Hi, this is Scott. I really appreciate our sponsors because they make the show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Developer Express. Become a UI superhero with Dev Express controls and libraries. Deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today. By leveraging your existing knowledge, you can build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. You can download your free 30-day trial at dx.hanselminutes.com. That's dx.hanselminutes.com. Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes, and today I'm talking with Tara Manicsic from Progress Software. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm getting there. I'm trying to get my head around how fast the internet is moving. Just when I think I know something, a new thing comes out. And then I have to decide, is that new thing something I already knew and they just made a new name for it? Or is it something else? And I'm trying to get my brain around PWAs, Progressive Web Apps. And I'm hoping you can explain it to me.
Yes, the internet is definitely moving at ludicrous speed. But hopefully, progressive web apps, one of the biggest things about them is that they're progressive. So it's not something that you have to go into full speed and just commit hardcore. It's something that you can progressively enhance on your web applications.
Okay. Could I take one of my old applications that it's already out there and just decide I'm going to call it progressive, or do they have to have certain characteristics before they get that name?
I mean, you could decide to call it progressive, but there are standards that you do want to kind of adhere to. So what I like to think about it is kind of a one-liner for what progressive web apps are. And it basically is taking your web application and using modern technologies like cache APIs and push APIs to make it more accessible and reliable and more engaging for your users.
Okay. That sounds good, but it also sounds a little squishy. Maybe we can break it down more technically. Is it more about being pinnable on a mobile device, or is it about dealing with flaky networks, or is it about push notifications? Is it all of those things or one of those things?
Yes, all of the above. So it is this kind of pie in the sky mentality of everybody's always been trying to figure out how to, make web applications available offline and make it so that you can engage with your user using push notifications. So this is what these progressive web apps are striving to do. So there are some kind of core concepts that, especially Google in particular, adhere to, but it's basically there are things like progressiveness. So it's in the name, right? And it's basically saying if a browser supports all the technologies that are made to do this application, go ahead, use it. If they don't break anything. Don't break somebody's app just because your browser doesn't support it. So that's the progressive part that's pretty important.
Okay, so let's break this down because I think, no, this is important though, but not everyone who listens to the show has English as their first language. So we should break that word down. So as I understand the word progressive to mean is things that happen gradually or things that happen in stages, step by step.
Yeah, like a build-up.
Right, like a build-up, okay. And then I remember that there was a term that we would use probably 14 years ago called progressive enhancement, right? Which was dealing with, little improvements. So it's you support geolocation. I'll use that. So almost like feature detection.
Yeah, and then I've also heard it used with JavaScript in particular, how you want to make sure that if people had turned JavaScript off, you were progressively making it so that they could still use your application. So handling things if JavaScript's off and, doing a progression, a buildup of things to make it so nothing just broke completely.
Right. As I recall, the term that they used was graceful degradation, which is kind of not as positive. I think progressive enhancements the happier way to say graceful degradation, but the essence is the same, right?
Instead of digressing, yeah.
The example I always use is the Gmail app. You know how when you show up on Gmail and it like you're on a really bad network and they're like, things aren't working out well. I'm going to go ahead and put you in basic mode.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that so we think of it in the way of, in a sense, like no backwards breaking changes. So the biggest thing is basically a build up to make it so that people aren't left behind if things don't work with the new things, the new build up.
Okay. All right. So I'm hearing that it uses the cool stuff that my browser, my desktop, my mobile device has, if it can, but it doesn't kick me out and make me feel sad if it doesn't support those things.
Exactly. Totally inclusive.
Okay. So that's one example. And then I heard you say something about the network being flaky. So you want this thing to load instantly and be, work even if I'm going through a tunnel.
Yes, exactly. And that's a really great example of saying if you don't have a network. So it has with service workers, which we can dig into later, which basically just as a heads up are just JavaScript files. So if you lose your service, you don't have a network, you go into a tunnel, you go on an airplane, it's able to cache things so that you can have them without a network. So it holds your information, your files, into storage so that if a user loses the network and it checks with the network to make a request and the network isn't available or it's really weak, it can take it from the user's storage and serve it up to the user. So if they have no network, they're still able to interact with your application.
Okay. So that sounds like it means kind of breaking things off of what I think of as the UI loop. Not everything's a for loop that runs directly on your UI. You're breaking your front end application into multiple pieces, and those service workers, those JavaScripts, they don't talk to the page, do they? They do their own thing, and they run in the background, and hopefully to keep things running, even while you're interacting with your page, or maybe you've even lost connectivity.
Exactly, and that's one of the core concepts of this service worker. The service worker API, like the JavaScript files that you're using to talk to the service worker API, is that they're running, so they're in between your application and the network or your servers. And I like to call them the little lurkers because they're sitting there kind of waiting to hear and intercept your requests to see if the network is available or if they need to get your information, serve that request with information that they have locally instead. So that is a core concept of the service workers. It's lurking outside of your application in between the network or the servers.
It sounds like that solves one of the fundamental problems that causes us to use apps. Like let's assume for the purposes of this discussion that you and I both agree that we'd rather write web pages and web apps than native apps because we're open web people, right? That's a fair statement.
Not a stretch for me.
Okay, good. So if we say that, then we'll say, well, I really have to use an app for this project because I want to make it so people can post messages offline, or I don't want to have duplicate messages, or I'm making a customer service rep app, and my customer service reps want to do their job on the train, and they're constantly updating their things. That sounds like an occasionally connected scenario. Clearly, I need an app, and then they leave. They're off of JavaScript. They're off the open web, and they're now writing native code because they didn't think it was possible.
Yeah. And so you're asking, what if they have both a native and the web app because they didn't realize that service workers were capable of?
Yes, that's it. I think that I'm wondering, are you saying that service workers will solve issues like background sync, being able to throw messages into the IndexedDB API and pretend that it's an outbox? Maybe no one knows those things exist, and those are fundamental aspects of being a progressive web app.
Yes, and that does exist, and you can do that with service workers. And that's that's one of the great things about being able to use the Cache API, and it's cache storage API as well, is that you're able to store these things, and the service worker is basically sitting there waiting to see when the network is available so it can push the user's interactions up. So it's basically making JavaScript files to say, okay, the user has submitted this new help desk title or document that I need to put up, but the network's not available. Okay, the service worker will wait until the network is available and know to send that up once it can.
Can you explain the relationship between that service worker, that background lurker, between that and cache storage API and the IndexedDB API? Because I don't understand that there's these two different storage APIs, IndexedDB and cache storage, and what I would use one for and the other for, and how the service workers talk to them.
So you can use like local storage and IndexedDB and caches like that. Like those are all basically storages that exist for your user to use, but they are synchronous. So the service worker API is asynchronous, so it can't actually work with IndexedDB, and that's where so that's where you want to be using the cache API, or the cache storage API, because those are also asynchronous.
Okay, so cache storage goes well with the service worker universe.
Yes.
Because they're both outside there, but IndexedDB is like a NoSQL database, but it's not something I talk to with the service worker.
Correct. Because of this,
but I
almost said synchronicity, because of which ones are synchronous and which ones are async.
Okay, but I suppose I could use the service worker to send a message to my main app to then do stuff with the IndexedDB.
Yeah, because it's basically, since service workers are basically JavaScript applications, you're able to just, treat it like anything you would do with JavaScript. But then you can have tools. You're able to use tools like the async app cache.
The async app cache. What's that?
Oh, so I mean, saying like so like local storage is synchronous.
The APIs that are asynchronous. Okay.
Yes.
So let me see if I understand correctly then.
Okay.
So paraphrasing what you said. So cache storage is, named caches that I can talk to with service workers. I can throw blobs in it. It's a way to like store things, all kinds of things, images, JavaScript, whatever.
Yes.
I can talk to it with the service worker. But IndexedDB is more like structured data, it's like a little database. And I would not talk to that with service worker. And it's a little more sophisticated, more powerful, and more databasey than the cache storage.
And I think the main reason that I've been aware of why we don't use those two together is because we're doing async with service workers and the cache API.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But now let's pop it from the low level all the way back up off the stack to the first thing that we said about progressive web apps, which is that they are reliable.
Yes.
So you should be thoughtful and put that service worker between you and your cache and your resource requests. So like I assume if I'm going through a tunnel and I'm requesting something and I can't get to it, my traditional web app would freak out in 404. And my progressive web app would maybe return stale data and let them know, hey, we're offline for a second.
Yeah. Or like maybe, so a lot of people, or a lot of things that people tend to cache are like you can cache blog posts, like the HTML and like the content of a blog post. And so when they go onto the site, the service worker goes in and immediately caches some of this content. So now you can either have it so that every page that can't be reached sends you a page that's saying this can't be reached, but these things can. So you can be selective about what you serve up when there's no network with the service worker. Ah,
okay.
This is quite a rabbit hole.
Well, like right now, my blog is not a progressive web app. It is responsive from a mobile perspective, and you can pin it to your home screen. But if you decide to visit it on a subway train, you can't see my stuff.
Yeah. So like if you went to my website and you, cause you can even on the, like Chrome developer tools, if you go into there and you, let me double check what it is. If you go under application, you can actually, there's like a service worker tab under the application tab that lets you click offline and reload the page to see how it reacts offline. So my website will still show you my full menu because I have the CSS and the HTML cached with a service worker. And I have like the front pages of everything. So it will show up, but as soon as you go to any of my non-cached items, then you'll get a 404 because I need to keep working on it.
Okay. So this is cool. So right now, I'm in Chrome, and I'm at TZ Manicsic, TZ Manix, and then I go to the developer tools, the F12 tools in Chrome. I've clicked on application, and I clicked on service workers, and there it is. There's a service worker, and it has a number. It says 18132 activated and running. So your service worker is running in the background, thinking about stuff. I'm going to click offline. The network just banged out, so now it's like freaking out. I clicked on your resume, which is a PDF, and I got internet disconnected. So that's cool.
But if you click on yes.
I click on weblog though, and I get a list of blog posts, and I'm offline. That's cool. I click on videos, and there's some.
So it shows you an interaction. Isn't that fun?
That is pretty cool. Oh, this is interesting. So here's an example. So I clicked on weblog. I got your list of posts, but I didn't get the background image.
Yeah. So
right?
Because I did that so one thing that they like to focus on is, so I like to do internet links for images instead of loading the resource. And I don't see it as a very necessary thing for my website to be used to have a background image, so I don't cache it. And that's kind of just being selective about what you cache, because there are limits to what you can cache. And you don't want to fill up a user's cache anyway. You don't want to be that mean person.
Yeah. What's interesting is now I'm sitting here in my developer tools, and I go to application to service workers. I'm on your site, but I can click show all. And I'm a little surprised. I see YouTube and Twitter and Office.com. I see all kinds of Bloomberg, all kinds of websites with service workers out there that are registered. Is this something I should worry about, or should I not sweat it? Are they going to be well behaved?
They should be. And your browser is pretty, dependent on the browser, they're pretty good about prompting you, like how much storage is happening. Some of them prompt you, and some of them just max out when your storage is like, let's see, like Firefox doesn't have a limit, but it prompts the user when like 50 megs of data has been stored, and you can clear your cache. But they should behave.
Okay.
They should behave.
Service workers aren't directly related to storing offline data, though, are they? It's just all part of like the toolbox that you use to make a progressive web app.
Yeah, and that is what they're mainly used for. But it is basically having a JavaScript file run independently of your app and be that intermediate between the network and your application. So you can do other things like use the push API to do push notifications with your application.
Okay. So adding something like push notifications, which I'm noticing a lot of websites are asking permission to send me notifications lately. That seems like something that's really blown up in the last year.
Yeah. It's interesting because Chrome in particular even has its own little push notification kind of thing where if you hit these certain ping points, like you visit a site twice in 2 days or like 2 times consecutively in 2 days, that it will give you a little pop-up that says, do you want to add this to your home screen? So it's all about their push for engaging the user more.
Oh, okay. So we talked about reliable. Now you're talking about engaging. So this is the idea where a web app starts feeling like an app, and I don't think of it as a web app anymore. It's just it's a natural extension.
Yeah. And that's
Interesting.
that's another big part of progressive web apps. It's about push notifications and like the home screen icons and also full screen views. Where they get rid of the browser Chrome.
Mm-hmm. Are we trying to fool people and like make them really believe it's an app? Like, will non-technical partner, like, my spouse or your spouse, will they think it's an app, or they just think it's an icon? They click on it and they get their information. They don't really care.
I hate to consider it as fooling people, but it is. I guess they would consider it more immersive in a way, but it is in a sense kind of taking you out of the web experience. So you don't have like the back buttons and the bar up top, but I think that it is more kind of just to engage the user more and have full attention, and the feel of native though can be tricky and feel confusing to users who may not be as technically aware of what's going on.
I'm trying to understand, if this is still a niche thing that is about, if it's only you and I and web people who are going to care about this, or if I can, if I can engage my parents or my partner, where she'll be able to successfully visit a web page, add it to her home screen, and then start interacting with it, like rather than maybe downloading a Twitter app.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part, is the kind of the journey of the user, because every time I go on a plane, I immediately think, oh, I should get an app for this because I'm going on a plane. I won't have service. My mind doesn't automatically go, oh, let me see if this, well, now it does, but it doesn't immediately say, let me see if this website has offline capabilities. My knee-jerk reaction is, oh, I need to get the app.
I think that right there is the real question. And that kind of brings it all the way around, where the web has been around for so long, behaving one way, that now we have to think about retraining, not just our non-technical people, but ourselves. I was on a United Airlines flight, and they were like, okay, in order to use this, go and get the app quick before we take off. Get the app.
Oh, I know. You're like, but I want to watch movies.
Yeah. I just visited mobile.twitter.com, which I've heard mentioned as being one of the best progressive web apps. And if you click on
mobile.twitter.com.
Yeah, mobile.twitter.com. And then I clicked on notifications, which was the mentions, and it immediately said, hey, would you like to enable notifications? It looks like,
and it does like the full screen, right?
Yeah, it looks like an app. It's got, it seems extremely thoughtful. Like, I think that's a great example of a progressive web app.
Yeah, they did a really great job, and they were a pretty early adapter to PWAs as well. And yeah, that's one of my. I think they handle the request for push notifications brilliantly. I really like how they did that.
Mm-hmm. So it should be on the home screen. It's something that you want to pin. You want to start thinking about, maybe I can use this rather than an app. So that's a good reason, a good benefit. Reliable, even the network conditions. Being on an airplane maybe would be cool. Push notifications. All of this makes the experience better. Am I just writing this with Visual Studio Code or Notepad or whatever? Like, is there anything? Is it just JSON and HTML? It's the same stuff I'm already doing.
Yeah. So with your service workers, you're writing that in JavaScript per usual. And like a lot of things will look familiar. Like the first thing you do in service workers is you check to see if it's supported in the browser. So you use an if statement. And then the rest of it is a lot of promises. So like you're waiting to see if this thing has fired in order to do this next thing. And then your code for your app is basically whatever you want to write it in. So for instance, what's really nice is like Preact, Vue, and they all have their CLI tools, like the Preact CLI and the Vue CLI, and Create React app all have a you can just run it from the command line to build up a sample app or your like core skeleton app. And it has a service worker file and a manifest.json right off the bat. The manifest.json is the kind of metadata being fed to your browser to let it know to do the full screen view and the icon to use to save it to your home screen.
Now, when I go and look about this information, it says everywhere I'm looking, it says this is a experimental technology.
Yes.
Should I worry about that? Like, does that mean that this is like, oh, well, that's cool, but maybe I should wait?
Honestly, a few months ago, I would have possibly said, like, yeah, maybe hold off a little bit. But it's, for one thing, the one main thing is that it's progressive. So it's not going to break anything if you do it on like your user is on a browser that doesn't support it. It's not going to break anything. So you could be ahead of the game for the browsers that will eventually support it. And the really awesome news is all of the big browsers are on their way to supporting it. So like Chrome has it in development. It's totally supported in Chrome. Edge is in development, but it's under a flag. And Safari is in development. It's marked as in development on WebKit. So everybody is jumping on this bandwagon.
So I'm looking at things like web application manifests, like this JSON file that describes my home screen icon and where, if there's an app that's related, and where I can get it, and then my icons. That's just a JSON file that I link to with a rel equals link. I could add that to my blog right now, and even if no one supports it, it would just kind of sit there and chill. So that doesn't hurt, right?
Totally. And that's honestly one of my favorite steps, because it's like this tiny amount of work that you can do. And then if a user has a supporting phone, they can have your icon on your phone. And I think it's really, I'm a big fan of icons, and you can use emoji for the short name. So you would just have, like on my phone, my app is just like the picture and my icon and 3 emojis underneath it. And I'm like, I find it very satisfying.
I'm glad that makes you very happy.
I have very high standards.
So it does seem like things have changed a little bit. I used to do home screen icons with meta tags, and they would stack up, and then I ended up with like a dozen of them. It sounds like the web has gotten together and decided that we're going to do manifests with JSON. It's easier, and then it only takes up one line, and if your browser doesn't support it, then they won't even ask for the JSON file, and no harm, no foul.
Yeah, nice and succinct.
Yeah, and then you can also get like a free splash screen.
Yeah.
And set theme colors, and like you get like some cool features for free, basically, don't you?
It's pretty awesome. And like there's a link on there, then it's basically saying like where you want your application to start it. If they click it from the home screen, do you want them to go straight to a certain page? Like you want them to go straight to blog posts, which you have cache. So you can even control kind of the navigation of how a user is clicking you from the home screen and where they're ending up. And Chrome developer tools have the ability to check this manifest and make sure that it's cool. So like setting this theme color and the orientation, and you would also said something about removing the URL and making it look like it's a standalone app. Well, you can test all that, right? Yeah, exactly. In the Chrome DevTools. Yeah, there's that where in the application tab, it actually has an also on the menu for the manifest. And you can see the icons and everything.
And then from there, I was impressed with this display browser versus display standalone.
Yeah, that's the full screen views.
Do I want a full screen view? Like I'm wondering if I want to do this for my blog, and how progressive my blog could be in like a couple hours work. I
mean, that's a good question. It's nice, but do you have the right navigation that you want on your blog that people won't need, the back button, or like, do you have something in place that users can navigate clearly without the browser Chrome?
That's a good point. So then people who are listening who might want to go and slightly progressivize their application should think about whether it's more app-like or more news site-like or more blog-like, and if it supports the kind of navigation that they would want to have.
Yeah, totally. And that's like, so that's one of my other favorite points about this is when you make updates to your web application, you just push those up. And instead of like an app, how you have to go through different stores and the regulations about submitting things, you don't have to do that with progressive web apps, which is really nice. And instead of like sharing an app with a friend and
that is actually a really good point.
Yeah, it makes, all your updates practically instantaneous. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah, well, and that's the thing, right? That's the open web, not having to ask anyone's permission or wait a week. Like, we're going to launch the app and then publish, and then we wait for the App Store to decide whether it's a good idea or not.
Yes, it's pretty nice. And it's like, so one thing I like is that it's more shareable, and this is kind of another standard of progressive web apps. So you can just send somebody a link to the progressive web app because it's a website after all. And instead of, say you want to go to a certain place in the page, instead of, telling somebody to download an app and then click this thing, go to this menu and then go here, you could just send them a direct link. So it's much more shareable than an app, which, the web is in general.
Cool. All right. Well, now you've given me work to do. Now I have to go and progressivize my web app. So you've gone and taken this interview and turned it into a to-do list for me. So I appreciate that.
Speaking of to-do lists, the team with Adi Asmani has made kind of a reference that's nice. It's like the to-do MVCs, which is like a list of how to do a bunch of framework examples. They have Hacker News PWA, which is hnpwa.com, that shows you different frameworks using and utilizing progressive web app standards. So a good place to just check everything out and see a bunch of resources.
hnpwa.com, Hacker News Readers as Progressive Web Apps.
Exactly.
All right. Very cool. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me.
This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.